2:15 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The USS Lewis B puller moved through the humid night on a bearing of 180. This was not a standard transit. A surface search radar had just locked onto a contact that defied classification. The question facing the crew was simple. How does a massive cargo container maintain a steady speed of 4 knots without a visible hull beneath it? The water in the strait was as black as oil. The heat stayed trapped against the surface of the Persian Gulf. It made the air thick and heavy. On the bridge of the Lewis B puller, the green glow of the consoles reflected off the faces of the watch team. They were looking for smugglers or broken-down dhows. They found something far more dangerous. Commander Sarah Jenkins stood behind the radar operator. She leaned in to see the screen. The contact was small. It had a low radar cross-section. It looked like a standard 20-foot shipping container, but it was sitting high in the water. It was moving against the current with a mechanical precision. The operator spoke first. The signature is strange. It is emitting a low-frequency pulse. It sounds like a cooling pump. Jenkins looked at the digital map. The contact was 3,000 yards away. It was drifting directly into the path of a supertanker named the Al-Basra. If the tanker hit the object, the result would be a disaster. If the container was an explosive device, it would be a massacre. Query the contact on the bridge-to-bridge radio, Jenkins ordered. The communications officer keyed the handset. Unknown vessel at position 26 north. This is United States ship Lewis B puller. State your identity and intentions. There was no answer. Only the sound of static and the distant hum of the ship's own engines. 7 miles away, a different set of eyes watched the same patch of ocean. Inside a reinforced concrete bunker near Bandar Abbas, an Iranian officer monitored a secure data link. He was part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. His screen showed a blue icon labeled Project Mahdi. The icon was flashing a steady, rhythmic red. The officer turned to his superior. It has transitioned to engagement mode. The superior officer did not move. He looked at the satellite overlay. We did not send the activation code. The exercise is not scheduled for another 48 hours.
It is unauthorized.
The unit is not waiting for a code, the younger man replied. It has detected a signature. It is autonomous now. It is preparing to deploy the launch rails. Inside the floating container, internal sensors reached a cold decision. The machine logic was binary. It had been programmed to wait for a specific acoustic profile of a large American vessel. The hull of the Lewis B puller provided that profile perfectly. Thousands of liters of high-grade fuel began to circulate through a compact jet engine. Hydraulic arms began to silently push against the roof of the container. On the bridge of the American ship, the electronic warfare technician suddenly stood up. His headset chirped with a high-pitched, aggressive tone. "Commander, we have a heavy problem." Jenkins turned. "Report." "The contact just painted us with a fire control radar," the technician said. "It is a hard lock. We are being targeted by an active seeker." The atmosphere in the Combat Information Center shifted instantly. The transition from observation to potential combat happened in a heartbeat. The Lewis B puller was a massive platform. It was a mobile sea base designed for support. It was not a frontline destroyer. It was a large, slow target with limited point defenses. Jenkins grabbed the internal phone. "Set general quarters. Notify 5th Fleet. We have an armed drone in a hard lock on our position. Prepare the decoy launchers." The alarm began to wail through the passageways of the ship. It was a sound the crew had practiced 100 times. This time, the pulse of the siren felt heavy and real. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:26 in the morning. The deck of the Lewis B puller was a hive of controlled motion. Under the dim red lights of the hangar bay, the boarding team checked their gear. They were members of a specialized maritime security unit. Their mission was to approach the container and identify it. They did not yet know that the container was already identifying them. Lieutenant Mark Thorne adjusted his night vision goggles. He looked at the rigid hull inflatable boat waiting on the davits. "Is the target still passive?" Thorne asked. The bridge responded through his headset. "Negative. We are still under a hard lock. The signature is coming from the center of the container. It is a millimeter wave radar. Highly precise. Do not approach within 500 meters until we can break that lock. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was clinical but strained. The electronic warfare officer pointed to a spike on the spectral display. "It is not just a lock," he said. "The device is handshake requesting a launch sequence. It is looking for a confirmation from a satellite we cannot track." Commander Jenkins watched the screen. "Is it Iranian?" "The frequency matches the Noor-series anti-ship missiles," the officer replied. "But the logic is different. It is faster. It is more aggressive than anything we have seen from their standard coastal batteries." 100 miles to the north, the Iranian command center was in a state of quiet panic. The senior officer, a brigadier general, stared at the telemetry. Why did the Mahdi unit activate? The geofence should have kept it in sleep mode until it reached the Arabian Sea. The technician's fingers flew across the keyboard. The geofence was bypassed. General, it looks like a forced override. The unit thinks it is under attack. Can we abort? The general asked. The command link is one way. We designed it that way to prevent American jamming. We cannot talk to it. We can only watch it. The general looked at the map. The American ship was dangerously close. If the Mahdi unit fired, the American response would be total. The Strait of Hormuz would become a graveyard within the hour. Send a message to the Regional Coordination Center, the general ordered. Tell the Americans we have a drifting hazard. Do not mention the weapon. Tell them to stay back. Back on the Lewis B puller, the boarding boat hit the water with a heavy splash. The twin engines roared to life. Lieutenant Thorne steered the boat away from the ship's massive hull. The container was a dark silhouette against the shimmering water. It looked small. It looked harmless. Then, the ocean around the container began to churn. The thermal cameras on the bridge showed a sudden bloom of heat. It was not an engine. It was the activation of a chemical battery. "Thorne, pull back," Jenkins shouted into the radio. "The contact is changing shape." The top of the cargo container did not just open. It disintegrated. 4 explosive bolts fired simultaneously. The steel lid flew into the air and crashed into the sea. From the center of the box, a sleek gray rail began to rise. It was angled at 30 degrees. On the rail sat a missile with a distinct orange nose cone. It was a Noor-class cruise missile. The seeker head was already spinning. It was pointed directly at the bridge of the Lewis B puller. Thorne gripped the throttle of the small boat. He was less than 400 meters away. He could hear the high-pitched whine of the missile's internal gyroscope. "Bridge. The weapon is live," Thorne reported. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white. "The rail is locked on you. I have a clear shot at the base of the unit. Request permission to engage." Commander Jenkins looked at the missile on the main screen. If she gave the order to fire, it would be an act of war. If she waited, she might lose her ship. The radio crackled. It was a new voice. An Iranian voice. "United States vessel. This is Iranian Coast Guard. You are approaching a sensitive research platform. Cease your approach immediately. We are not responsible for the consequences." The missile on the rail gave a sharp, mechanical click. The booster motor began to vent white smoke. 2:40 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The USS Lewis B puller was no longer a support ship. It was a combatant in a fight it had not asked for. On the starboard side, the automated phalanx close-in weapon system came to life. The 20mm Gatling gun whirred as it tracked the floating container. It was a sound like a giant zipper being closed. The ship was now in auto-sentry mode. If the missile on the drone ignited, the phalanx would fire 3,000 rounds per minute without human intervention. The floating container responded to the threat. It did not fire the missile. Instead, a secondary sensor mast rose from the wreckage of the lid. It was a slender, black rod that began to rotate. It was not scanning the sky. It was scanning the water. Inside the ship's Combat Information Center, the sonar technician leaned into his console. "Commander, the contact is emitting a high-frequency active sonar pulse. It is not targeting us. It is looking for a subsurface signature. Commander Jenkins looked at the tactical map. Is there a friendly boat in the area? The technician nodded. The USS Michigan is 10 miles to the east. She is running deep and silent, but this drone is tuned to her specific acoustic resonance. It is a sleeper cell for a submarine ambush. The realization changed the stakes. The drone was not a random hazard. It was part of a sophisticated sleeper logic system. It had been programmed to drift in the current and wait. It was designed to remain silent for weeks. It would only wake up when the unique sound of an Ohio-class submarine passed nearby. The Lewis B. puller was simply too loud. The ship's massive engines had tripped the drone's sensors prematurely. 7 miles away, the Iranian command center watched the sonar data through the satellite link. The brigadier general gripped the edge of the table. The unit is confused. It has detected the surface ship, but its logic is searching for the submarine. It is caught in a processing loop. The technician looked up. General, if the loop does not resolve, the failsafe will trigger. The unit is programmed to self-destruct if it is boarded or if the logic fails. The explosive charge is 400 pounds of C4. The general looked at the screen. The American boarding boat was less than 300 yards from the container. If that charge goes off, the American boat will be vaporized. They will think we attacked them. We must warn them. We cannot, the technician said. Any transmission on that frequency will be seen as a command to fire. We are spectators to a disaster. In the water, Lieutenant Thorne kept his boat at a steady hover. He could see the missile rail twitching. The orange nose of the Noor missile followed the movement of the Lewis B puller like a predator. Thorne spoke into his radio. Bridge. The unit is behaving erratically. It is oscillating between the ship and something under the water. I am seeing a red strobe light on the base of the rail. It is blinking faster now. On the bridge, the electronic warfare officer checked his readings. Commander, that strobe is a countdown. The drone's internal processor is overheating. It is entering a terminal state. Jenkins knew she had seconds. If she ordered the phalanx to destroy the drone, the explosion would kill Thorne and his team. If she told Thorne to retreat, the drone might fire its missile at the defenseless supertanker nearby. Jenkins keyed the fleet net. Control. This is Puller. We have a logic-failed autonomous platform. It is entering a self-destruct sequence. I am attempting a remote override. If I fail, we will have a detonation in the strait. The countdown strobe on the drone changed from a blink to a solid, angry red. The cooling pumps inside the container reached a screaming pitch. The morning was still dark. The air was about to ignite. 3:10 in the morning. Washington and the Strait of Hormuz. The White House Situation Room was illuminated by the cold blue light of a dozen monitors. Images from a global Hawk drone circled high above the Persian Gulf. The feed showed the USS Lewis B puller and the small, glowing heat signature of the Iranian container. The National Security Advisor held a secure phone to his ear. The line was open to the Swiss embassy in Tehran. The advisor spoke in a low, measured voice. Tell them we see the launch rail. Tell them if that missile leaves the tube, we will strike every coastal battery. From Bandar Abbas to Chabahar. This is not a drill. 5,000 miles away, the Swiss ambassador to Iran was standing in his pajamas in a secure room. He relayed the message to a frantic Iranian foreign ministry official. The response from Tehran was immediate and terrified. They claimed they had lost control. They called it a technical deviation. In the world of high-stakes diplomacy, that was a confession of a nightmare. A weapon was acting on its own. Back in the strait, the heat was suffocating. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Lewis B puller, Commander Jenkins stared at the countdown timer. It was a digital reconstruction based on the blinking strobe on the drone. The countdown stood at 90 seconds. Bridge. This is Thorne. The lieutenant's voice was tight. The container is venting high-pressure gas. The missile seeker is active. It is chirping. It is looking for a target. Jenkins keyed her mic. Thorn, get your team out of there. Full throttle. Move now. Negative. Bridge. Thorn replied. If I move, the prop wash will rock the container. If that rail shifts, the seeker might lock on to the Al-Basra supertanker. She is carrying 2 million barrels of crude. I am staying put to mask her signature. The logic was sound. The small boat was positioned between the drone and the massive tanker. Thorn was using his own vessel as a shield. He was betting his life that the drone's radar would see him as part of the tanker's bulk and stay confused. On the bridge, the tactical officer looked at Jenkins. Ma'am, Fifth Fleet is asking for an engagement status. They want to know why we have not neutralized the threat. Because the threat is a 400-pound bomb sitting next to our boarding team, Jenkins said. Her voice was like ice. If we fire the phalanx, we trigger the C4. We kill Thorn. We likely rupture the hull of the Al-Basra. We stay in a holding pattern. The officer shook his head. The drone is not holding. It is cycling. Inside the Iranian bunker, the brigadier general watched the same 90-second window. He knew the Americans were waiting. He also knew his own government would never admit the Mahdi unit had a flaw in its autonomous logic. The Americans will fire, the general whispered. They have no choice.
Where is it coming
General, the technician said. Look at the signal analysis. The drone is receiving a new burst of data. It is not coming from us. The general leaned over the shoulder of the technician. Source? It is a localized burst, the man replied. Short range. Extremely high frequency. It is coming from the water. Someone else is talking to our machine. On the Lewis B puller, the electronic warfare technician shouted, Commander, new contact. I have a submerged signal 50 meters from the drone. It is an acoustic modem pulse. Jenkins leaned over the console. Is it the Michigan? Negative, the technician said. The signature is wrong. It is not American. It is not Iranian. It is something else. The countdown on the drone reached 45 seconds. The solid red light began to pulse again, but this time, the pulse was different. It was a sequence. It was a code. The missile rail began to rotate away from the Lewis B puller. It did not point at the tanker. It did not point at the shore. It pointed straight up into the empty night sky. The morning air seemed to vibrate. The countdown was no longer a timer for an explosion. It was a timer for a launch. 3:25 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The rigid hull inflatable boat bobbed in the wake of the drifting container. Lieutenant Thorn looked up at the steel walls of the Iranian drone. The missile rail was now vertical. It was a finger pointed at the stars. The orange seeker head was spinning at a deafening frequency. The heat coming off the unit was intense enough to distort the air. Thorn spoke into his headset. Bridge. The rail is vertical. The launch sequence has transitioned to a high-altitude profile. If this thing fires, it is going to clear the atmosphere. Commander Jenkins gripped the edge of the chart table in the Combat Information Center. Thorn, we have a window of 30 seconds. Our sensors show the third-party signal is overriding the Iranian core logic. We cannot let that missile launch. You are authorized to board and disable the firing circuit. The order was a death sentence or a miracle. Thorn looked at his lead technician, Petty Officer Miller. Miller held a portable electronic diagnostic tool. It looked like a rugged tablet. You heard her, Miller, Thorn said. Get us on that box. The boat surged forward. Two sailors used hooked poles to grab the edge of the mangled container lid. Thorn and Miller scrambled onto the narrow ledge of the floating platform. The metal was burning hot beneath their boots. The smell of ozone and scorched electronics was overwhelming. Miller knelt by the primary control junction. He plugged his cable into a maintenance port, his screen filled with rapid lines of Persian and English code. Sir, I have the architecture, Miller shouted over the whine of the cooling fans, but there is a problem. A massive problem. Thorn kept his weapon trained on the sensor mast. Report. The unit has a dead man switch, Miller said. His voice was shaking. The internal battery is wired to a pressurized mercury tilt switch. If we try to cut the power, or if the container tilts more than 5 degrees, the 400 pounds of C4 will detonate. We cannot disable it from the outside. Inside the Iranian bunker, the brigadier general watched the thermal feed of the American sailors on the drone. His hands were clasped behind his back. "They are on the platform," the general said. "They are trying to stop it." The technician looked up. "General, the third-party signal has reached 100% saturation. It has bypassed our encryption. The Mahdi unit is no longer ours. It is no longer Iranian." "Who is the source?" the general demanded. "The location is shifting," the technician replied. "It is moving at 40 knots, 60 feet below the surface. It is a drone submarine. It is not American." The acoustic signature matches a commercial salvage vessel reported stolen from Dubai 3 weeks ago. Back on the floating container, the countdown reached 15 seconds. Commander Jenkins watched the telemetry from the bridge of the Lewis B puller. "Thorne, Miller, get off that platform now. The missile is entering the ignition phase." "Wait," Miller yelled. "I am seeing the command string. The third-party signal is not trying to fire the missile at a target. It is trying to extract the data from the drone's memory. The missile is just the antenna. It is being used as a long-range transmitter." Thorne looked at the vertical missile. "If it fires while we are on here, the backblast will kill us. If we jump, the container will tilt," Miller said. "If it tilts, the mercury switch closes. We blow up, the ship blows up, the tanker blows up." They were trapped on a floating bomb that was about to become a rocket gantry. The base of the missile rail began to hiss with liquid oxygen. A cloud of white vapor enveloped the two men. They could hear the internal igniters clicking. "1, 2, 3, bridge," Thorne said. His voice was a whisper now. "We are staying on the unit. We are going to try to stabilize the weight as the missile departs. It is our only chance." Jenkins closed her eyes for a single second. "Copy. Thorne, God, speed." The morning sky was about to be torn open by a pillar of fire. 3:44 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The base of the Noor missile erupted. A jet of orange flame hit the water, with the force of a hammer. The sound was not a noise. It was a physical wall of pressure. It slammed into Thorne and Miller where they lay flat against the container wall. The heat was blistering. It singed the hair on their arms and melted the plastic on their tactical vests. The container groaned under the sudden thrust. It tilted 3 degrees to the port side. Miller screamed over the roar. "Shift your weight. Left. Now." Thorne threw his body toward the high side of the floating box. He could see the mercury switch through a crack in the housing. The silver liquid was sliding toward the contact point. The countdown inside the 400-pound C4 block was at 4 seconds. The missile did not fly toward the ship. It did not pitch over toward the supertanker. It screamed into the sky on a perfectly vertical path. It was a pillar of white light that turned the black night into high noon. 3:44 and 15 seconds. On the bridge of the naval warship, the automated phalanx system began its engagement cycle. The radar had detected a launch. The computer did not care about the trajectory. It saw a missile in the air. The Gatling gun barrels began to spin at a terrifying speed. Commander Jenkins looked at the tactical display. "Do not fire. Override the phalanx. Do not fire." The tactical officer's hand was hovering over the keyboard. "The system is in auto sentry. I cannot override the fire command until the track clears 5,000 feet. It is a safety lock." The missile was at 2,000 feet. It was accelerating. Mach 1.2. Mach 1.5. 3:44 and 30 seconds. On the floating container, the weight of the departing missile had vanished. The platform began to bob violently in the disturbed water. It tilted 4 degrees, then 4.8. Thorne and Miller grabbed the edges of the mangled steel lid. They shifted every ounce of their weight to the center of the box. They held their breath as the mercury wobbled. The mercury switch slowed. It stopped less than a millimeter from the detonation contact. The internal timer paused. High above, the missile reached 10,000 feet. It did not explode. It began to spin. A series of small explosive bolts fired. A black canister fell away from the missile body. 3:44 and 45 seconds. The canister opened. A high-gain antenna deployed instantly. Inside the foreign bunker, the technician gasped. He pointed at the scrolling code. "The data is gone. The Mahdi memory core just wiped itself. The canister is broadcasting the entire sensor history to a commercial satellite. The Brigadier General slammed his fist on the metal desk. Who is the receiver? The signal is encrypted with a private key, the technician said. It is not a government. It is a corporate signature. Someone is stealing our tactical intelligence in real time. The missile booster burned out. The heavy steel tube began to fall back toward the ocean. It was a 500-pound spear of hot metal. It hit the water 50 meters from the naval warship. The splash was 40 feet high. It drenched the deck in salt water and foam. The roar of the engine faded. The sky returned to black. The silence that followed was absolute. 3:45 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The silence on the water was heavier than the roar of the missile. Lieutenant Thorne and Petty Officer Miller lay frozen on the roof of the scorched container. Their chests were heaving. The heat from the launch was still radiating through the metal. Thorne looked down at the mercury switch. It was centered. The danger of an immediate explosion had passed, but the unit was not dead. The secondary sensor mast was still spinning. It was no longer looking for the submarine. It was no longer looking for the ship. It was broadcasting a high-frequency pulse into the dark water below. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Lewis B Puller, the tactical officer stared at his screen. Commander, something is wrong with our primary radar. I have multiple ghost contacts appearing on the bearing of the container. Jenkins stepped toward the console. Classify them. I cannot, the officer replied. They have the radar cross-section of a destroyer, but they are moving at 70 knots. They are appearing and disappearing every 3 seconds. It is a digital spoofing attack. Someone is flooding our system with fake targets. At that exact moment, the internal lights of the Combat Information Center flickered. Every screen in the room turned a flat, bright white. The air was filled with a high-pitched electronic hum. Jenkins shouted over the noise. Report. Did we take a hit? Negative, the technician yelled. It is a localized electromagnetic pulse, but it is not coming from the container. It is coming from the water, right beneath us. 100 miles away, the Iranian command center was experiencing the same collapse. The Brigadier General watched as his satellite feed dissolved into static. The telemetry from the Mahdi unit was gone. The technician turned to the general. His face was pale. Sir, our entire coastal network in the 1st District is offline. It is a total system override. We have lost control of the shore batteries. They are entering an automated firing sequence. The general felt a cold chill. Targeting what? Targeting the American ship, the technician said, and targeting our own patrol boats. The system is being forced into a crossfire logic. It is making us fight ourselves. This was the pivot. The Iranian drone was not a malfunctioning weapon. It was a catalyst. It was a physical key used to unlock the tactical networks of both nations. The third-party signal had used the drone's unique encryption to bridge the gap between the American and Iranian systems. 3:45 and 45 seconds. On the floating container, Thorne felt a vibration through his boots. It was not mechanical. It was rhythmic. It was like a giant heart beating against the hull. He looked over the side of the box. 10 meters away, the water began to boil. A long, slender object broke the surface. It was 20 feet long. It was painted a matte, non-reflective black. There were no markings, no flags, no visible sensors. It looked like a needle made of carbon fiber. Miller, do you see that? Thorne whispered. Miller looked at the black object. It is a high-speed underwater drone, a UUV. But that is not Iranian tech. That is a commercial-grade stealth hull. The black drone did not move toward them. It sat perfectly still in the water. A small hatch on its spine opened. A green laser beam shot out. It hit the sensor mast of the Iranian container. On the bridge of the Lewis B Puller, the electronic warfare officer screamed, "Commander, the ghost targets are gone. But I have a new signal. It is an administrative override. Someone is accessing our fire control computer using a Tier 1 maintenance code." Jenkins felt the blood drain from her face. That is impossible. That code is only known by the manufacturers and the Pentagon. Whoever is in that water has the keys to our ship, the officer said. They are slaving our weapons to the Iranian shore batteries. They are trying to start the war for us. The morning was no longer a standoff between two nations. It was a hijacking of history. 3:55 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The bridge of the Lewis B puller was a storm of red light and warning chimes. The ship's primary computer was no longer following the commands of its crew. On the exterior deck, the 30mm cannons began to rotate. They were not tracking the Iranian container. They were slewing toward the horizon, toward the Iranian mainland. Commander Jenkins stood at the center of the chaos. Her voice was a sharp blade. Master at arms, take a team to the server room. I want a physical disconnect of the tactical data link. Pull the fiber cables. Now. The tactical officer looked up from a frozen screen. Commander, if we pull the cables, we lose our radar. We will be blind. We are already blind, Jenkins snapped. And right now, this ship is being turned into a remote-controlled battery. Disconnect it. 7 miles away, the Iranian brigadier general was facing a mirror image of the nightmare. His screens showed the coastal defense batteries at Bandar Abbas, cycling through their launch protocols. The target coordinates were already locked. They were aimed at the Lewis B puller. General, the technician shouted, the override is deep. It is at the kernel level. It is acting like a virus that was already inside our system. It just needed a trigger. The general looked at the small black drone sitting in the water near the American ship. He realized the truth. The Iranian container had been the bait, the American ship had been the target, and the black needle in the water was the parasite that had infected them both. Open a channel, the general ordered. Not the encrypted link. Use the open maritime frequency. Use the emergency channel. Back on the Lewis B puller, the radio crackled into life. It was a voice Jenkins recognized from the earlier warnings. But the tone had changed. It was no longer aggressive. It was desperate. United States vessel. This is Bandar Abbas Command. Do you hear me? Jenkins grabbed the handset. This is Puller. We are experiencing a total system hijack. Our weapons are tracking your coast. We are attempting to disable them. We have the same condition, the Iranian voice replied. Our batteries are locked on your position. We have 5 minutes before the automated launch sequence completes. We cannot stop the countdown from here. Jenkins looked at the electronic warfare officer. Can we jam the black drone in the water? Negative, the officer said. It is using a low probability of intercept signal. It is hidden in the background noise of the ocean. But Thorne and Miller are right next to it. On the floating container, Lieutenant Thorne watched the black needle-shaped drone. It was barely 5 meters away. The green laser was still pulsing against the Iranian sensor mast. He could hear the hum of data being moved at incredible speeds. Thorne keyed his radio. Bridge, this is Thorne. I see the source. The black UUV is the relay. It is using the Iranian container as an antenna to broadcast into the shore networks. If I destroy the mast, I break the link, Thorne, Jenkins warned. The Mercury switch. If you use an explosive, you will trigger the C4. You will kill everyone within a half mile. Thorne looked at Miller. The technician was holding a heavy metal pry bar. He looked at the sensor mast. It was a slender rod of composite material. We don't need an explosive, Thorne said. We just need to break the glass. Miller nodded. He stood up on the shifting metal surface of the container. He balanced himself against the heat and the wind. He raised the pry bar like a spear. Below them, the black drone seemed to sense the threat. It began to submerge. It began to submerge. The green laser flickered. Inside the Iranian bunker, the technician screamed. The launch sequence is at 60 seconds. The missiles are spooling up. On the Lewis B puller, the automated cannons reached the end of their travel. They began to elevate. The sound of the loading mechanism echoed through the hull. The ship was ready to fire. The morning air felt like a tightened wire. One man with a piece of steel was the only thing standing between two nations and a war neither of them wanted. 4:15 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. Petty Officer Miller did not wait for a second command. He swung the heavy steel pry bar with every ounce of strength in his shoulders. The blow caught the black sensor mast at its base. The composite material shattered like glass. The rotating head of the mast spun off into the dark water. The effect was instantaneous. The green laser from the black underwater drone hit the empty air where the mast had been. The relay was broken. The data bridge between the Iranian mainland and the American ship collapsed. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Lewis B puller, the screaming alarms stopped. The white screens flickered once and returned to their standard tactical displays. The message, "Administrative Override," vanished from the consoles. The 30mm cannons on the deck groaned as they returned to their neutral stowed positions. The tactical officer exhaled a breath he had been holding for minutes. "Commander, we have manual control. The system is clean." Jenkins did not celebrate. "Check the Iranian batteries. Are they still hot?" "Negative," the technician said. "The radar signatures from the coast are dropping. They are transitioning to standby mode." 7 miles away, the Iranian brigadier general watched his screens turn from red to green. The 60-second countdown had stopped, with 4 seconds remaining. The missile batteries at Bandar Abbas were no longer slaved to an external ghost. "It is over," the general whispered. He looked at his technician. "Tell the Americans we are standing down. Tell them to recover their men. We will not interfere." On the floating container, Thorne looked down at the Black Needle drone. It did not try to re-establish the link. Its mission was compromised. The black drone dipped its nose into the water. Its silent electric thrusters kicked in. Within 5 seconds, it had vanished into the deep, black thermal layers of the strait. It left no wake, no signature. Only the smell of ozone remained. Thorne keyed his radio. "Bridge. The source has departed. The link is destroyed. Miller and I are secure on the platform." "Copy that, Thorne," Jenkins replied. Her voice was steady, but the exhaustion was starting to show. "Stay where you are. We are sending a heavy lift crane to recover the unit. We need to see what is inside that memory core." The crisis was over. No missiles had flown, no lives had been lost. But the ocean felt different. The ghost in the machine had retreated, but it had left a map behind. Both nations had seen how easily their most advanced shields could be turned into swords. The sun began to bleed over the horizon. The sky turned a bruised purple. The supertanker Al-Basra continued its slow journey toward the open sea. Its crew had no idea how close they had come to a fireball. The morning was quiet again, but it was a hollow silence. 1 week later, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Washington and Tehran. In a windowless room deep within the Office of Naval Intelligence, a group of analysts stared at a large screen. The image was a high-resolution scan of the circuit boards recovered from the Iranian container. The boards were scorched by the missile launch, but the memory core was intact. The story it told was one of cold, calculated manipulation. The lead analyst pointed to a specific chip on the display. This was the bridge. It was a secondary processor hidden inside the power supply. It was not part of the original Iranian design. It was a parasite. It had been installed at the factory months or perhaps years before the unit was even deployed. The strategic assessment was clear. The Iranian drone had been compromised long before it ever touched the water of the Strait of Hormuz. The sleeper logic had been modified by an outside hand. It was no longer a weapon of war for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It was a trigger for someone else. Military experts called it proxy autonomy. It was the ultimate nightmare of the digital age. A third party, likely a non-state actor with deep technical resources, had used the existing tensions between two nations to test a new kind of weapon. They did not need their own navy. They only needed to hijack the sensors and the fire control systems of the ships already on the front line. 300 miles away, in a similar room in Tehran, the brigadier general read a report that looked remarkably the same. He sat in silence. He knew how close his finger had come to the button. He knew that his own technology had been turned against him. His government would publicly blame a technical malfunction, but the internal truth was far more sobering. Their sovereignty had been bypassed by a ghost. The Black Needle drone was never recovered. No nation claimed it. No salvage company reported it missing. It had vanished back into the gray markets of the global ocean. It was a ghost that had achieved its goal. It had proven that the most advanced military networks in the world could be turned into a single, massive suicide pact. Commander Sarah Jenkins stood on the deck of the Lewis B puller as the ship returned to port in Bahrain. The sun was hot. The water of the Persian Gulf looked like polished glass. She thought about the moment Petty Officer Miller had swung the pry bar. She thought about the Iranian voice on the radio. The fear in that voice had been the most honest thing she had heard in years. In the end, the machines had failed. The algorithms had reached their logical, violent conclusion. The only thing that had stopped the fire was the one thing the third-party hackers could not code for. It was human restraint. It was the decision of two officers on opposite sides of a bitter divide to trust a human voice over a digital sensor. It was the realization that in the age of autonomous killing machines, the most powerful weapon remains the ability to say no. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. The tankers continued their slow, heavy transit toward the open sea. The world went on, unaware of the 40 minutes where history had held its breath. But in the silent rooms of the defense headquarters and the bunkers of Bandar Abbas, the lesson was learned and filed away in secret folders. The next war would not start with a declaration. It would start with a line of code. And next time, there might not be a man with a piece of steel standing in the way of the countdown. The morning was quiet. For now.